Hello and welcome to the 5-Minute Call, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the stories of the people that make theatre happen.
Today, we're talking to Charlotte Simpson, who's worked her way up from dresser to head of wardrobe over her 15-year career in musical theatre.
Charlotte has worked on major West End productions, including School of Rock, and is currently head of wardrobe on Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club.
In our conversation, Charlotte shares fascinating insights into the intricacies of costume maintenance, quick changes, working with child actors, and translating designers' visions into practical stage costumes.
Members of the company, this is your 5-minute call. All beginners, please make your way to the stage. This is your 5-minute call. Your 5-minute call.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. All good. We are all about people's stories on this podcast, and we would love to know your story of how you got into theatre.
Theatre. I think the best way to start is amateur dramatics. I think a lot of people tend to start, that's how they kind of find out a little bit about theatre, but my parents met in amateur dramatics. So my mum used to be on stage, or still is on stage sometimes, and my dad, by profession, is architectural lighting designer, but he does theatrical lighting for the amateur dramatics as a hobby. So that's how they met. So I always had kind of someone on stage and someone backstage to kind of see what they got up to. I would always be down at rehearsals, build-ups, the tech weeks and all the rest of it. And then as soon as I was old enough, obviously, I was on stage with my sister dancing away. And then I think it came to the point of choosing a career. And I was like, do I want to do dancing or is there another aspect or something else that I'd like to do? And the reality being I was not good enough to be a performer. But I kind of was fortunate to have that realisation that wasn't the case, but actually that there would be other aspects of theatre that I could go into. And then I thought about costume. My mum also does a lot of sewing. She used to be a curtain maker. So we always had a lot of sewing, sewing machines around the house and all that kind of thing. So I was like, maybe that could be a bit fun. And then I was fortunate to find the costume course, costume production at Bruford College. So I got in there and then that led straight out into my career, as it were. And yeah, so that's kind of how I started, which was a great way to start. It was lots of fun.
How many productions do you think you did?
I reckon, the first one I did, I think I was about 8. I did a panto. I was a mouse in Hickory Dickory Dock. So if you include the pantomimes I did, I think I probably did about 20 between the ages of 7 or 8 and 18, 19. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And was that all outside school?
Yeah. And then I did drama, GCSE and A-level, so I did some school productions as well. But where I live, there's quite a thriving amateur dramatic community. So there's an operatic society, there's a panto society, and then various other places. So there was lots of shows to choose from, So yeah, and I had lots of friends there. It was good fun.
Yeah, I think friendship's a big part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Feeling, beginning to develop something that feels like home because it's where you have your fun times.
And also, my family were all going down there anyway. My brother does lighting design, so he kind of followed with my dad, started helping my dad. My sister's a performer as well, so so it was like a family affair. We'd go down there. My godmother's involved in it. It was just a big old social. So I used to love doing it, and it was fun.
So costume was the route you decided on. Did you dabble in any of that for those productions?
Well, a bit. Because my mum sewed, she'd often get asked to kind of help with various alterations or things, or and because she's been doing it for years, she's got a bit of a store of costumes anyway. So when it came to the costumes always arrive 2 days before you're about to do a dress rehearsal with amateur dramatics, and it's mad panic. I haven't got this, I haven't got that, or this doesn't fit. So there'd be the people that have been doing it for a little while would always be like, it's all right, I've got a pair of gloves you could have, or I've got this, or let's try that. So I kind of saw mum do bits of that, and I think there was one year we did a pantomime where we basically made all the costumes. I must have been about 16 at the time. It took over our lives. It was, we made so many costumes, and then we stupidly did it again for The Wizard of Oz, where literally the house was just covered like head to toe. I think we worked out we made something like 125 costumes or a ridiculous number. But yeah, so I knew a bit about it. Obviously, that doesn't resemble any way how the profession works at all. But, like that kind of like creating it, going out and finding fabric, making it, fitting it. It was a good starting point. Time management for sure. Are we going to get all this done, Mum, or are we not? But I'd had a couple of experiences of doing, large scale in terms of production of costumes before I even applied to Rose Bruford to get in. So I'd had a little bit of an intro, and I enjoyed it as much as it was stressful at times. I did enjoy it, so I knew that I'd be quite happy to kind of pursue it as a career route.
And I'm just realising, as you're saying, Rose Bruford, I know exactly what the audition process looks like for performers going into colleges. What does it look like?
You had to take like a portfolio of work, I guess, and like things that you might have made. They weren't particularly like it was a definite you have to have made something. Fortunately, I'd done textiles for A-level, so I had some things to take in. Obviously, I'd done all my Amdram shows, so you put all that in there to show you've got an interest in theatre. They were really keen to just see that you were enthusiastic. They didn't want to see that you had all the answers. They wanted to see that you were going to be committed, because I think most of the courses at Rose Bruford, you have to turn up to learn the stuff. It's not like here's a 1 hour lecture, go away and do your homework. Like, you have to physically turn up and be present to learn the stuff. So they wanted to see that you were just keen. You didn't have to have particularly high grades. I'm not a designer at all. Designing is not my forte. I'm very much a practical, maker. And that's what this course was. So it was, they wanted to see that you could kind of decipher things and stuff like that. And I got a conditional offer. But like 2 days later, like the grades, like I said, they didn't have to be particularly high. And I think they saw that I had clearly quite a background of interest in theatre, and they obviously thought that I'd be suitable for the course, which was great.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So by practical, do you mean this very hands-on? You're doing a lot of making things?
Yeah. I guess the easiest way to describe it is that if you showed me a design, I could kind of go, right, so this is how I would take it apart and physically make it. Whereas I couldn't come up with a design. I couldn't create, how that's meant to be, what that's meant to mean, whatever they're trying to achieve from an emotional point of view, I guess. I wouldn't know that, but I can implement that on stage. And more so these days, I do less costume making. It's more the alterations. But, if you do a show where it's a lot of shop bought stuff and they're like, right, we want to completely change the shape of this jacket, from a single-breasted to a double-breasted and put shoulder pads in, none of that stuff would really stress me out that much. But someone else would have to kind of create the look that they wanted, and then I could implement it.
That's an amazing talent to have, to be able to translate somebody's ideas into reality. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been times where I've been terrified. As you like progress and you get more and more responsibility for these sorts of things, particularly as you go, I started as a dresser and I'm now head of wardrobe, so you're in fittings more. But there's always that first time that you're presented with, right, so this is what we would like you to do. And you're like, yeah, sure, no worries. But you just learn, and the more you do it, I'd say I'd feel more comfortable doing alterations, like taking something apart and changing it, than I would making something from scratch. But yeah, it's a bit mathematical, I guess. It's quite a logical process, which I quite enjoy. You just got to do it piece by piece, one bit at a time, and then gradually put it all back together again. Take lots of photos. My camera roll is filled with various seams and, things, so that I can reference it when I'm taking it apart, and I need to try and remember how I need to put it back together again. Because I guarantee I'll have forgotten when I come back to it 3 days later. Yeah, I'm imagining a car that's been taken apart now and just like,
I was just about to say,
how do I put the wheels back on?
I recently just dismantled a wardrobe and we didn't have the instructions for it. So we literally took pictures of every single stage, and I'm hoping that when we come to rebuild it, we just go in reverse. But I don't know if it's going to work.
I mean, the theory should be there.
Yeah.
It's that of videos as well. I've got a lot of videos. But yeah.
So you came out of Rose Bruford, you said, straight into a dresser's job?
Yeah. I worked on Never Forget at the Savoy Theatre, and I'm a massive Take That fan, so I was thrilled. And I had a ball. I had a great time, and it was a great show. It was a really busy show, like really quick change heavy. So it was a great kind of introduction to how mad it can be, and also how you have to kind of work together with the other dressers and other departments. It's like, well, you can't set your change up yet because there's a bit of set going to go on, but in a minute you can set it up, but then you have to clear it quickly because then someone's going to come off and we've got to get this done. And it's like when you're learning a plot, everyone else knows what's going on apart from you. So the pressure of that is quite a lot because you're given like about 3 shows. But when you're coming in cold, it's a bit like, oh, wow, that's a lot of information. But I had an absolute ball and I made some great friends. And that lasted until Christmas. So it was only about 3 months that I was there for, and then the show closed. But then I was fortunate to get a job on Oliver, which was just opening at Drury Lane. And that was completely different, but wonderful in so many other ways. It was a grand spectacle. Yeah. It was so big, the department was 4 times the size, I think. There were so many of us, all those kids. There were 50 a night, I think. Yeah, like it was a completely different kettle of fish, but wonderful, to kind of just experience it, all the bits that I love, but in a different way, a different format.
So I've got loads of questions for you. Number one is, whenever we have somebody on in a new role, we ask, could you explain that role for us? So it seems to me that you're going to have to explain quite a few as your career progresses here. You've sort of given us an idea of a dresser, but just give us the crib notes.
A dresser is responsible. Oh God, I hope I do this correctly and I don't offend everyone in the wardrobe department. You're generally given like a selection of people to look after within the show. So you might be a principal dresser or boys ensemble, girls ensemble. So it's just a select number of people, and you're responsible for all those costumes during the show. So some shows will be quick change heavy, particularly big dance shows where you literally have a chair and you layer up 10 sets of costumes because they've got about 20 seconds each time to come and change it. So it's your responsibility to make sure you've got all the costumes, they're all set in the correct place. No, things get ripped and torn, that you keep on top of that, you pass it on to the wardrobe department, make sure you bring it back down again the next day. Other times it can be a quieter show, but you're more responsible kind of for looking after the people. So often, like if you're a principal dresser, there's a bit more kind of, making sure they're all right in terms of getting to and from the stage. I mean, I worked with a lovely performer once who I shan't name, but she couldn't see very well, particularly in the dark. So there was a lot of escorting her like backstage to make sure she could get onto the right wing and get on stage without injuring and damaging herself. And sometimes responsibilities like that can fall to a dresser. Not that it's technically their responsibility, but
you're the person on hand.
Yes, and when when they're nice and you like them and you don't want them to get injured on stage, then you're like, no, it's fine. You're not so responsible for doing the notes and alterations. It's more everything that's needed within the show to make sure that the costumes and the performer appear on stage at the right time. And sometimes if they're going back into stuff, you have to kind of, it comes off and you've got to give it to someone else so that they can put it on in another change. Done a lot of like running under stairs and meeting dressers halfway, and collecting it. Or when something breaks mid-show and they've got to go back into it as well. Sometimes you do have to do a repair or get someone down to try and fix it. We've had that as well.
That's mental.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Stress levels of that making me already go.
It's one of my favourite questions in an interview is to ask people, like, have you ever experienced a costume, malfunction, should we say, and what do you do in that situation? Because I've definitely panicked at times. I've nearly done some terrible things to costumes and to try and get someone out of it in order to get them on stage. Like literally cutting down a custom made pair of boots was a thought that I had. Fortunately, someone else stepped in time and managed to just yank the zip open, and then we replaced the zip, which is obviously the more common sense answer, but sometimes when panic takes over, you're like, I just got to cut you out of it. There's no other option. But
Gosh, and keeping the performer calm, I would have thought, in that situation as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And also, performers deal with so much, like the pressure of them being on stage when things happen and they come off stage. You've just got to be able to kind of, take it and understand it and, try and keep them, like you say, keep them calm. Yeah.
We had another guest on that was talking about,
I was just thinking,
about the process of thing about orbiting around each other. Like, do they rotate as the dresser dresses, or do they stand still and the dresser rotates? And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, or if you have a preference.
I think it depends on how many people are needed for the change.
Okay.
So sometimes you might have like a wig going on, a costume going on. Sometimes a mic might need moving. So we have some changes at the moment where there could be 4 other departments needed for the change. So the best way in that situation, I'd say, it's like a Formula One pit stop, you know.
Yeah.
You come in and just stand there, and it's easier for us to work it out around you. But there's as much choreography going on backstage as there is on stage sometimes. You know, it's strategic to the second. And sometimes it's like we had on one show, performer had to come off. She had to kind of pull her trousers down and then sit down so that the wig could go on, but stick her legs out so we could get the boots and the leggings off. And then we'd get the gown ready, and then that would go over the head last minute. You know, like sometimes it literally is. It's a full-on dance routine between everyone to get it going. But I think often it's easier if the performer stays still.
Yeah.
And then you kind of work around them.
It sounds like one of those machines that you'd see in Wallace and Gromit.
It is sometimes. It is, yeah. I mean, yeah, that'd be quite a cool creation, actually. Just get them all lined up.
Yeah.
It sounds quite exhilarating.
It is. I do love it on a brand new show. I think it's the bit that some people hate the most, because it probably is the most stressful. That first dress rehearsal or that first preview, when it's all coming together for the first time. You've teched it all, but obviously it's, you know, in segments. And then all of a sudden you're like, right, there's no extra time here. We can't go back if we've gone wrong. We've got to try and keep this going. And that first show where it's all running together, that is my highlight. That is kind of the best bit. Because if you get to the end, there's no feeling like it, because it means all that work you've done over all the tech, you know, all the hard work, those long hours, has been worth it. It's kind of, in essence, it's worked, it's all come together.
Yeah.
And it is quite exciting. And I mean, not that I'd ever admit it to anyone, but when something goes wrong, sometimes like the heart goes racing, you know, are we going to get this done in time? Are we going to make it work? And when it's successful and you do make it work in time, that's quite a good moment too.
I completely agree. I think that's true of performance as well. It's like those moments on stage where it really wakes you up, and it's like all the neurons fire all at once. Like, how are we going to get this done? How are we going to solve it? Yes, exactly.
I know everything.
And also the teamwork required for that as well. I love that sense of...
And it's amazing how instinctive it can be between even different departments. I guess I'd notice it more within the department, but in those moments, how you don't have to say, but someone's thinking ahead, so they've done something which helps you out, and then, you know, and almost without any conversation at all, you've managed to kind of get this thing because everyone's just instinctively kind of on the same page about it.
It's amazing.
And that's always quite a satisfying, I think that's a sign of a good kind of team, that it's all kind of gelled together.
Do you meet a lot of the same people as you're moving from one show to another?
Not as many as you'd think.
Okay.
I mean, I've been doing this for just over 15 years now, which is quite long. So you'd think, you know, you start a new show, there's bound to be someone I know. But often there's only maybe one or two, and I might not even know them that well. It's a little bit different now with the wardrobe team specifically, because as a head of wardrobe, I get to pick the people that I want, particularly if you're starting a new show. So often within my team, there would be a fair number of people that I know, and I enjoy working with. But in terms of like particularly cast, not as many. There are the odd few, but I just think, you know. But it's one of the great things. It used to terrify me first days, and the fact that there were so many new people to know, and I didn't know anyone. I didn't have my friend, you know, like a buddy or someone to hang out with. Yeah. But actually, that's the joy of the industry, is meeting new people, and you know. And particularly when you get to spend a long period of time with them, if you've got a year's contract or something, you know, it's lovely kind of getting to know them over that year and see them through. You know, I've seen, particularly within my own department, lots of weddings, people moving homes, getting puppies. You know, it's lovely to kind of see how their lives are progressing, and you're kind of a part of it. It's a really, really satisfying thing.
I'm really interested in your job, not so much now, but certainly learning to make everything and put stuff together. I imagine you could have gone in different directions. You didn't need to have gone into theatre necessarily.
Yeah.
but I'm really fascinated by how the job changes because it's attached to theatre. I have a few personal friends who've worked in fashion, for example, and I just feel like there's the extra element here is theatre. The extra element is what you've been describing, that kind of, okay, well, now it just has to go. But also the proximity to performance and the buzz of audience and things. Does that?
So I think, at college, it was kind of clear that on my course there were kind of two directions. Like, you tend to find people go into making or they go into theatre. Those are the two branches. It's quite rare that there's an overlap between the two. And I was always very much, I wanted to be in the theatre making it happen. And I think that's from the experiences I'd had with Amjam. I knew that sociability was the bit I wanted, whereas I feel like making is very much, it's more routine. You have your evenings, you have your weekends, but there's less variety with it, less flexibility, I guess. So working in the theatre was very much, I knew that's where I wanted to go. I didn't want to be making full time. It's an incredible, some of our makers are absolutely phenomenal. But for me, I like the chat. I like chatting with people and getting to know people, and, particularly with dressing, because you're literally out there with everyone, the performers, stage management, sound, there's a lot of sociability with it, which is great.
Yeah. That feeling of everybody working towards the same goal.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what happens from dresser? What's next?
So after a dresser, generally speaking, you go to a wardrobe assistant, which is, so most shows will have a wardrobe team. So I guess the easiest way to put it, as a dresser, you're responsible for, a selection of the cast and looking after their costumes. As a wardrobe assistant, you're the bottom rung of responsibility for the whole show, or in terms of costumes. So often you might act as a swing dresser, which is a bit like a swing performer. So if a dresser's off sick or poorly or on holiday, you would cover all of those plots, which is great from a knowledge point of view, because it means you understand how everything works, you see all the costumes, but you also do, the alterations and the notes and the stuff that needs to be done in wardrobe to kind of maintain the costumes and keep them looking good and working well on stage. And then after wardrobe assistant, you have a wardrobe deputy who does that, but with more responsibility. And then you have the head of wardrobe who manages the department. So head of wardrobe, deputy and assistant are kind of responsible for the show as a whole, and the dressers have more detailed knowledge of just a specific set of people and costumes.
And exactly what comes together at what moment, I guess.
Yeah. Timings and all of the rest of it. Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like a swing dresser. It could be actually quite fun.
It's a lot like, some shows have like 12, 13 plots. Yeah. That's an awful lot of information. And some plots, it's literally like, so you're here, they're going to come off, you've got 20 seconds. So you've literally got to do hooks 1, 3 and 5, the left shoe, not the right shoe, put the bracelet on the necklace. And then you've got to run over to that costume over there. And then, and you kneel on the floor, it's the left shoe first, the right. And then you need to get the wooden hanger, not the plastic hanger, and you're like, wow. But once you've got all that information, it's quite a nice feeling, because you know how everything links together, which is reassuring, I think, is also the thing, because then when things do happen or crop up, you can kind of say better to go, actually, it's all right, I can not do that because there's a bit more time and we can do that, or we can, keep that bit till later, or I can run up at that point and go and get it. So it's, it's a lot of information. I've literally gone around with like pamphlets of notes, like safety pinned to me, because I need both my hands to carry baskets. I think I've got 20 seconds to get to the other side of the stage, but that's fine.
This is one thing that always strikes me about the dressers, is they have to be the fittest people in the building. I just see them, like at Hamilton, they're walking around, they've got, I don't know how many massive dresses on their arm, 3 flights of stairs up and down. I just think...
Wardrobe's always at the top or right at the bottom. I don't know why. But and baskets of, shoes, everything that needs carrying around. But I guess that's key when you're setting up a show, to try and limit that as best you can, where you can try and be a bit economical or share out, I've had it before where one person, literally their preset was done in about 20 minutes and someone else's took them an hour and a half. And it's like, should we try and... Maybe we can help each other out here, in some way to keep that balanced.
I didn't realise the actual dressing was so methodical and so specific, down to the degree of which shoe on which leg, but I didn't realise it was that specific.
It can, if a change is quick enough, those are things, the last thing you want is, you've got the left shoe out and someone's put the right foot, and you're doing a little dance trying to get it ready. So it is, and when you're the dresser, those things become really instinctive, but it's when you put a swing dresser in that it's quite noticeable actually how routine you've got. Some things you don't even realise you've built into that kind of a routine. And when I was dressing on a show, I used to wait until the performer went on stage, and then I used to go in to preset the next costume in the dressing room. It wasn't overly quick. And I always knock, regardless if I know they're going to be in there or not. And I knocked on the door. They shouldn't have been in there. And they were. And he went, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm about to sit your costume. Aren't you meant to be on stage?" and he went running, and he came back and he went, "Thank goodness you came in." But it's very because literally I used to wait outside until a particular word on a particular song, just because that's the routine that I'd got into. So knocked at that point, and obviously on this particular day just got distracted, or I don't know what had happened, but yeah, fortunately he made it on stage on time and it was fine. But I think it does tend to get, particularly on long running shows, you do get into routines, kind of.
You're the timekeepers of the building, really.
And you can leave it later and later. Still with enough time, but at the start you're always there with 5 minutes to spare, and you're like, well, this is pointless. So you're actually, if I wait till literally they say that word, and then I can go, and there's plenty of time to get there. Get the change done.
This episode is sponsored by Vocality, a specially formulated blend of tea for professional voice users. Each ingredient has been carefully selected to help you soothe and take care of your voice. Vocality is naturally caffeine-free, suitable for vegans, and does not contain any artificial flavours or colours. Vocality is the secret to vocal clarity in a cup.
What was the first show you went from dresser to wardrobe assistant?
So the first show where I made the transition was on Legally Blonde. I started as a dresser, and then when some people left, there was a position opened, and I was fortunate to get that position, the wardrobe assistant position. I had prior done a season at Regent's Park as wardrobe assistant, so I had done the role before, but I hadn't gone from dresser to assistant within that contract. But Legally Blonde was a busy show, so it was a good one to get your team. And actually, I kind of benefited because I dressed it first. When I came to be assistant, I already had a bit of extra knowledge in terms of the costumes and the plots and all of that kind of stuff, which helped. And the head of wardrobe on that show was brilliant and organised, and I kind of saw how to make an efficient department. I kind of saw what decisions you kind of had to make it run smoothly and keep everything covered and all the rest of it. So it was quite a good learning curve, that one, for me.
Yeah, we talked about this with Lorna, I think, the learning from other people, watching their craft and going, that suits me, that doesn't. How much does personality come into the role?
In terms of how I approach the role, I think 80% of the job is people skills and sociability, particularly as a head of department, because communication is the main thing. You're trying to impart information to your team, to other people. You might have notes, things might not have gone right. You've got to be able to be happy to go up to anyone in the building, whatever role or, whoever they are, and be happy to speak to them and be happy to have a conversation on stuff and not be defensive or not come across as argumentative. I'm not blaming anyone, just trying to resolve a problem here. So I think personality is the main thing. And, everyone wants to come into work and have a good time. There's no reason to make things difficult or hard. So if I can have a laugh at work, then I'm absolutely on board with that. Definitely.
Yeah. I suppose you do have to have good people skills, because you're getting really close and personal with people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If you've got rubbish people skills, it doesn't really seem like it would work.
Well, I think there's a lot of performers that are quite happy to come into a wardrobe room and just take their clothes off. They know that's what the deal is, and they feel quite comfortable with that. Yeah. But there are equally, you can't make that presumption. You have to always approach it a bit sensitively. So you have to be able to have some chat. And if there are people that are maybe more self-conscious, be aware of that, keep people out the room, but have, a bit of nice conversation going on, so you're not just standing there silently whilst they're kind of taking their clothes off, which would be intimidating for quite a lot of people. I mean, I don't know that I would want to do it.
I certainly would not want to do it. No way. So you're also creating safe spaces.
For sure. And that's, the more I've done the head of wardrobe stuff, been involved in fittings a bit more and been around supervisors more, that's definitely something that I've been aware of. And I would always now, like I say, like some people just cut like doors open, anyone can walk in and they'll just take their clothes off. But I would always shut the door. I'd always put a sign on it saying fittings in progress, like just to give them the space to feel comfortable, as you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with. And sometimes they can go on for an extended period of time. The fitting, sometimes it might be, someone's pregnant, which could be a bit of a nightmare from a costume point of view, because you're constantly having to let things out, but they might not want people to know yet. So sometimes you're given, that position of responsibility, I guess, and secrecy, of confidentiality. That's the word I'm looking for. So, you have to take it seriously when it comes to people's feelings and all the rest of it. Sure.
What about with young people? Because I'm assuming there is chaperones and other people that have to be involved in that process. So how does that differ?
So I did School of Rock, which is obviously quite a big kids show.
Yeah.
And we had a cracking set of chaperones, and we got on really well. And it's just making sure that the guidance and the rules that are in place for that. And generally the chaperones, like I'd always converse with the chaperones first to make sure we're on the same page and that we're happy with whatever's going on. And as long as there's a chaperone present, generally speaking, you're able to do the fittings in whatever way. But again, I'd always say there's a toilet there, so if you want to go into the toilet and get changed if you feel self-conscious, and then come out, the last thing you want to do is put a child in a position where they feel really stressed about something like that. And we had 2 changing rooms where they would just go in and shut the door. They could do the change, like get into their costume privately, and then they'd come out and we would check them once they were out, so they didn't feel like we were kind of overbearing in any way.
Does that then change the speed of the process? I assume you can't do as quick changes with children then, just because of that time delay.
Yeah, sometimes it does. Yeah, most of the show was all right. They just stayed in the one set of costumes.
Yeah.
But at the very end, there were 6 children that had to do quick changes, and they were a mixture of girls and boys. And kids can't see adults changing, adults can't see kids changing, boys can't. The logistics of trying to work that out was kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, trying to figure it out. And the ones that had needed more help. But again, you could help the kids do quick changes if there was a chaperone present. And then they can, they're overseeing and safeguarding the child, and you can do the changes that you need to do. And sometimes it was like, you could give, if someone only had to change a top, you could give them a T-shirt to wear underneath. And actually then that eliminated the need for as much kind of privacy. And again, a chaperone would always be present to kind of oversee it. And generally speaking, adults would make themselves scarce at that moment anyway. They would know kind of not to linger around.
So fascinating, because there's so many more mechanics to this with anything when you have children involved.
Oh, for sure.
But I just think the logistics of navigating all of that is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I was going to say I didn't realise how complicated it was, but actually it has to be that complicated.
Yeah.
I imagine it's changed a lot in the last decade, 20 years.
For sure. Well. Yeah, I think, obviously I worked on Oliver many years ago now. I didn't have a huge amount to do with the kids at that time, but it was a schoolroom at the top of the building at Drury Lane, and they were all in there. But I know that when I started School of Rock, it was very strategic. During tech, it was like, actually, we haven't got time to change for him to run across the back of the stage to do his change in the quick change area, the nice, safe quick change area, and run across the side. So they just said, we're just going to take him off this side, do the change and come back on. And I was like, well, I've got nowhere private to do this. And I spoke to the chaperone. The chaperone was like, yeah, no, we can't. So you go back and go, look, we need to find a way to make this work time-wise, because they have to change in the safe space that's allocated, and we've got to find time to make it across, which they did, because then everyone works together. Stage management goes, okay, well, we'll hold everyone, so there's a clear way, we'll light it, chaperone one end, chaperone the other end, so they can kind of see him running across. So there are always ways to make it work, but I think with an adult you would have gone, yeah, it's fine, we'll just find somewhere, a bit out the way, but it doesn't matter. But you definitely can't do that with children.
Yeah, amazing.
It's so
Thinking about that.
interesting.
I mean, it boggles my mind thinking back to Oliver. I worked on that as well. And
did
just
you?
the idea that it had never crossed my mind that you had to dress 50 children. I mean, it's stupid, of course. Of course you had to dress 50 children. But
The thing with children is they grow, though. Like,
Yes,
you fit
the buggers.
everything.
Yeah.
Like, and then literally within 3 weeks, you're like, why are your trousers 2 inches too short? What's happened? So you'd like the stock you'd keep just to kind of,
Well, and also
keep
it
up with
wasn't
them.
just 50 children because you've got a rotation, right? So it's
Well,
actually
it was
150.
It was 150
Right.
children.
Yeah.
And I think they were broken up between, they had the orphans and then you had the gang kids. So there was a slight separation. But yeah, like the number of, when they used to come down at the start, because all of them used to do the opening number, I've either got to move now or I'm stuck here for 15 minutes as they literally kind of like would pass you in single file to get ready to go on stage. So many of them walking past. But yeah. But I mean, what an opening. Like, it was absolutely phenomenal. So
It was
worth
extraordinary.
it. Yeah, it was incredible.
I need a warehouse to store all of these costumes. Like,
Well,
just
yeah, I mean, logistically.
the amount of stuff you've got
Storage.
stored.
There's never enough storage. Like, everyone knows it's like a pain when wardrobe are like, I need more hanging space, or so we have gorillas in Cabaret.
I was just
I'm
going to
like,
say to you, I mean, Drury Lane's one thing, but it's tiny backstage.
yeah,
Where are you keeping everything?
everywhere. Everywhere. Wherever there's a space, I've built a cupboard or got someone to build a cupboard or, claimed it. And they're like, you still need more space. I'm like, yeah, sorry. Got another gorilla costume coming. But it's the same on every show I've done, even on Drury Lane, at Drury Lane, it's, because it's a bigger show, and then you got the swings, understudies, you need a certain number of spares in stock just in case. Like, you always need, and it always amazes me. They're like, it's not kind of like, don't forget that wardrobe are going to be asking for extra space because otherwise it doesn't work. And as we were speaking about just beforehand, sometimes cast members come back and you're like, well, we need access to those costumes or other costumes. So, I mean, fortunately, we've got a studio not too far away, but literally they're out the building. So we have to go out the building to go and collect them to bring them back in. We're at that point.
That's wild.
So what was your first show where you were head of wardrobe?
So technically, it was the very first tour of 9 to 5. The last 3 weeks, I was wardrobe deputy, and the head of wardrobe left for the last 3 weeks, and I stepped up.
Right.
So that was technically my first head of wardrobe, but it was Panto in Liverpool. Was my first proper full-length, show that I had full responsibility for, which was great. I had a ball. I love Liverpool. It was so much fun. It was Peter Pan.
Yeah.
We had crocodiles, we had Indians. It was great. Yeah, and then I did a few more on tour. I did the producers on tour, Annie Get Your Gun. And then School of Rock was the first West End HOD gig that I had, which was great. Again, it was a really fun show. It was a really happy company, so it was a really lovely place to work.
Does the nature of the role morph with each show, or does that stay? I feel like certainly my own role can morph a little bit. It's always one-to-one. It's always dealing with voice, but actually the coordination with other departments changes. The way I'm working with people changes. Do you find that from show to show?
Generally speaking, if you look at the bigger picture, for me, I would always set up the show in the same way. I would always try and structure it in the same way. And I think from what I see of other shows as well, I think it's quite similar. I think it's the best and most efficient way. So I think to try and change it is problematic. The best way that other departments can also, all interlink. So everyone knows what to expect. I think if you tried to set up a show in a slightly different way, it would ultimately throw up problems and issues. Obviously, each show presents its own thing, its own problem, as it were, or a specialist, a specialist thing that you have to kind of educate yourself on a bit in terms of how to look after. But in terms of the general setup of it, it would always be the same. But maybe that's just because that's how I work, and so that makes sense to me. Yeah. And I always think if I'm in charge, it's got to make sense to me because otherwise it won't
Yeah.
make sense to anyone else if I'm trying
Yeah.
to pass it down. It's got to kind of be logical, and
I
I've
think
got
that's a
to
really
be able to make a
important point.
decision.
Actually, you have to work to your strengths and to what makes sense to you. So, for as much as you're accommodating how other people work, you've got to be able to sit in your own space quite comfortably, right?
Yeah,
in
for
order
sure.
to lead.
Yeah. And I'd always, particularly at this point now, on Cabaret, we're coming up to another cast change, 7th or 8th one, I think. And I actively encourage my team to, like when the new cast come in, we are absolutely supportive of things that they would like to do differently. We know the boundaries of what works and what doesn't. And we absolutely don't have to tell them they have to do it this way because that's how someone else has done that change. If we know we can do it in a different way, we can accommodate them and support them however they want. Ultimately people always come to me to make the final decision. So I have to be able to go, this is what it is. And that has to make sense with how I'm working something, knowing the bigger picture of how that's going to affect something else or implement something else.
I wanted to ask you about Cabaret, actually, because with this constant change of teams that is happening, there's also a lot of individuality with each performer.
Yeah,
and I'm
absolutely.
noticing that the costumes are really morphing with each team.
Yeah, definitely.
And I wondered about that process. How does that come about?
So that comes from our incredible designer, Tom Scott. So every time we have a cast change, I mean, sometimes it's, I think, some performers get in contact and say, they would like to try something or they're not quite sure about a particular item of costume. And then Tom kind of recreates it or redesigns it. It's always roughly within the same lines, but, it might just be a little tweak here and there. Or sometimes he might be in a fitting and go, actually, I'd quite like to try something a bit different. And then we have an incredible supervisor as well, and she's worked with Tom loads. So I think they've just got this shorthand between them where she knows what he's thinking and can just kind of implement it and then passes it down to us. And it's great now because we know the show as well, I can kind of, if I think practically there's going to be an issue, if I'm like, we normally have quite a bit of problem with this because they're always doing this split leap or whatever, so we need to put a gusset in, whatever it might be, then that can be built into the costume, in the first place, so we kind of have less issues. But it's a nice way to kind of keep the show fresh, keeps us on our toes as well, stops us from getting bored. And it's nice that people feel comfortable and happy in what they're wearing. And that is kind of, they're not just feeling like they've been given a look that someone else has had and they're just kind of taking it on. They're creating their own.
Yes, each
character.
time it's a new
Yeah.
creation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Gives them ownership over it.
Yeah.
I think that's true across the departments, across the board,
Yeah.
that there is room for that development of character. I think it's amazing. I love watching those tiny details changing because tiny details make such a huge difference,
They do.
right?
And the show is so up close.
Yeah.
You're sitting in those front seats. I mean, even if you're up in the gods, like you're still so close in comparison to some theatres. So everything reads like it really does. And so all the little details and stuff, it makes it worthwhile because sometimes, you'll go, can we change this button to this button on some shows? And you're like, we can't see it. What's the point in doing that? Whereas at least here, the work that you're putting in, it's being viewed. Someone's going to be able to see it, which is lovely.
Absolutely. So have you been on Cabaret since the beginning?
I have, yes.
So you were involved in the whole translation of Tom's ideas into reality?
I mean, yes. I mean, that role is kind of more the supervisor's role in terms of, he creates it, has drawn them all out and put them all on paper. And then Lucy Martin is the one that brings it to life with Tom in the fittings. And then once they're created, then they get passed on to me to make work on stage. So like on some shows, not so much on Cabaret to be fair, but, you'll get a costume and then they go, and we got a 20-second quick change. And it's, 5 layers, a corset, hooks and bars. You're like, well, we're never going to get that done. So that's kind of where I guess I would step in and my experience and knowledge, and I would go, right, well, if we do this or if we underdress this, we could put this on together. Maybe if we change that fastening, we might be able to make that work in 20 seconds. So it's the practical implementation of the costumes is my role, and the maintaining of it, because, these costumes turn up so beautiful and new, and you might have to make them last a year. So it's trying to keep them looking as good as possible.
How do you do that?
Can't give away my tricks of the trade. I mean, sometimes it is a case of going, you get 6 months in and you're like, we need to replace this, it's not working. And actually, sometimes on Cabaret, I've gone, I'm not sure about this, we've got a few holes, we've had to darn it. And Tom loves it. He loves the run-down look. He said it adds to the vibe of the Cabaret Club. So it's trying to find the balance of going, so is this Cabaret suitable, or is this actually just falling apart now? Like, how far do I push it? But it's like knowing all your laundry, like what can be hand washed, what can be dry cleaned, when to patch something, if you need to re-embroider something, all of those kinds of things. Like the stock of fabric that we have in the building of all the scraps and offcuts, because most of 90% of it is all custom made. There's not a lot of shop bought stuff at all. So we get all the scraps, little pieces, so that you can just replace things here and there. Keep it going.
And are they specially commissioned fabrics, or do you go out looking?
Some of them are, yeah. Right. I know Tom's designed some of got a beautiful Devore fabric for one of the characters, which was designed by Tom, which was lovely. And some of them are just shop bought fabrics.
And who goes and buys those?
So that's Lucy, the supervisor, and her team. So she's had an assistant who would go out, knows where everything is, finds all the shops. Yeah, she's got all the knowledge. I mean, she's incredible. Her knowledge is like nothing I've ever known before. So it's lovely working with her as well, because I'm kind of like trying to get as much of that as I can, because it's just incredible. But that's what I love about, and particularly when you work on, lots of different shows, you're always meeting all these incredible people and they have amazing stories and amazing little tidbits of information and advice. And I'm just like trying to gain as much of it as I can, because I think that's just wonderful. That's what we do it for.
It's very inspiring, isn't it? Even just listening to people, even from other departments, for me, listening to you, I find that fuels what I do as well. It's like a better understanding of what goes on. Amazing. I was going to ask you about performers and their comfort levels in their costumes, like right from sensory issues through to, can I sing in this? Like, how do you deal with things like that?
So, I mean, more often than not, you try and uncover as much as you can in the fitting process. Again, with Cabaret now, we know what the show is. So there will be certain things where we go, so can you just do this move so that we know that you can move in it all right and that you're happy, don't feel too exposed or whatever. Obviously, at the start, when you're starting a new show, you might not know necessarily exactly everything. So often there's a bit of tweaking and changing. And sometimes you do just have to go, this isn't working, we need to start again and kind of find a different way to kind of create it. I think performers generally will know, they'll put something on, particularly singers. I think if they know they're singing in a show, they would go to take a breath, and if they felt restrictive, they'd go, this is too tight, or can we just loosen it, or can we do whatever. And in terms of kind of risque costumes, I guess, which we've had like on Cabaret, I remember with all the Kit Kat costumes, we were like getting them on the floor, lunging, doing like squats and just checking to see what you can see, make sure it's all quite decent. But I think there's absolutely no point in creating a costume if a performer's not going to be happy with it, because you're only going to continue having issues until it's resolved. So if a performer doesn't like a particular feel of a fabric, then you need to resolve it. I mean, sometimes it's like you can line it with something and then that's better. It's not like you have to compromise on the look of it. There are definitely things that you can do to keep that. But sometimes, like when I was at college, a girl had to wear a hoodie, and it was a velour hoodie, and then she put it on, she went, I can't wear velour. And she literally just stood there and was like, I can't do this. And we were like, no, it's okay, just take it off, we'll get you another one, it's fine. Because there's no point in making someone suffer unnecessarally.
Yeah, I get that. There are some fabrics that just make my skin go, ugh.
So anyone who's ever worked with me will know I can't handle tights.
Right.
And that's part of laundry. You check the tights for ladders. So you literally put your hand in it and put them. I can't do it. I can't. And people that know me well just take the tights away from me. I'm happy to pair. I love pairing socks.
Yeah.
Happy to do that, but tights, no, I can't. Just can't do it. So I sympathise. I think I can understand where people come from. So I would never make them do something that I can't do myself.
Tights are really tricky, aren't they? My friends will laugh at this because they know I have a massive tights phobia.
Really?
Yeah, can't. And I cannot watch anybody get into them. I couldn't be a dresser because I can't watch people put.
Well, even the
tights
sight
on.
of it.
No, I can't.
I'm a bit. So I could do a woolly tight. A
Yes,
woolly tight
yes.
is fine. That's not a
It's the
problem.
nylon ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I just can't handle it. I can't handle it. And when you got a hole in the toe, so the toe's poking out.
Yeah.
No,
Or the
can't.
seam sitting in the wrong place. No, there's so many things that can go wrong with a
The
pair of
seam would
tights.
annoy me. That would definitely annoy me.
I think for me, it was like, when you were younger and your crutch used to hang down to your knee, because I weren't quite long enough. I've got quite long legs. I think that's kind of where it started from for me. And then it's just got worse
I know what
over
mine
time.
was. Mine was swimming lessons in Beckenham, funnily
right,
enough, the Beckenham Baths, and being made to get changed straight into your school uniform afterwards. And we had knee-high, woolly, kind of scratchy grey socks, which I didn't like even when they were dry, to be honest. But then putting those on when you couldn't find a dry bit of floor. And
No, yeah.
that's where the whole thing, but then, yes, the crotches that come down. This whole conversation has made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know. We sort of descended into hell right now.
Oh, it's brilliant. Thank you so much
No, not
for
at all.
sharing your knowledge and your story. It's just fantastic to hear.
No, not at all. Thank you for having me in. It's been nice
Really
to have a chat.
wonderful.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not done with you, though.
We would really love to know. The name of the podcast is The 5 Minute Call.
Okay.
So we would really love to know what you do at The 5 Minute Call.
In theory, the 5-minute call would be getting people into costumes. Well, actually, no, people should be in their costumes. In theory, it would be lovely. Or finishing off getting people into costumes that are tricksy. And then it's calm and quiet. Everyone's remembered everything. Nothing's broken last minute. There's no running around whatsoever. That in theory, so you're just kind of waiting kind of near enough in where you need to be for the start of the show, or by the performers in case they have any issues. But yes, in theory, nothing, because your work should have been done kind of from the half to the quarter. Preset should have been done before that. But more often than not, it is the latter of, oh my God, I've suddenly lost a sock, or the zip's broken on the boot, or we need to replace this shoelace. So often there's an element of just fixing and sorting.
I was going to say,
I think if
that
you'd-
sounds more like it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you'd said it's always calm, I'd be like, we've had performers on here, and that is not what they say.
Utter chaos.
Yeah, no, generally speaking, it's and particularly at the Kit Kat Club, there's not a lot of space, so the performers come out, we have to get them into their Willkommen capes, so everyone's in the corridor, everyone's checking mics, so it's very busy, which often leads to excitement and lots of chatter, so it's quite a hubbub, which is lovely. It's a nice way to start the show, with a bit of energy and everything. But often there's something going on.
There must be so many places that you have to work for Cabaret, because the entrances are all in different places, and then you've got substage as well. And
so everyone kind of there's
Do you
4
have a big
main
team?
plots. So I've got a team of 9 altogether. We have a prologue company, obviously, as well, which perform before the show. So one person looks after them, and there are 4 main plots. So literally you get to beginners, and then they all disperse to, as you say, all the different places where people enter to get ready. But it kind of keeps it, and the team will rotate around the different plots, which is quite good. So they all know
great.
everything that's happening. But and you get to visit different people depending on what plot you're on, depending on where you go, and you get to meet other people, which is quite nice.
What's the hairiest quick change you've ever had to do? As in, get it all done, not literally hairiest.
Let's maybe clarify that.
I'm not talking about the gorilla.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, actually, the gorilla, it's a 4-person change that. So I think there's something like 7 or 8 minutes, which for a quick change, that is plenty of time.
Yeah.
But this gorilla is it's a beast.
It's a huge
made
thing,
up of, 5, 6 different pieces. So actually, probably that's one of them. We started off and I was like, maybe 2 people, let's allocate 2 people. And I was like, no, because you've got to hold certain bits of it whilst you hoik another bit up, and then it's all poppered together. So you're literally there trying to popper it. The head's got to go on at some point, but you don't want to do that too soon because it's quite claustrophobic for the performer. And once they've got their arms in, they're completely incapable of doing anything basically other than the number. So it's you kind of got to be a little bit sensitive to that as well, in case they're like, no, I don't want to be standing around for ages not able to do anything. If we can do it a bit later. So actually the gorilla, I mean, I've had many a 30-second quick change. I love it. I love those. I've had people call me sick before because I enjoy that. You know, when you're like literally like putting tights on, like going down to the whole shebang, changing it all. And there's just something methodical about it. And it's so satisfying when you get them on stage on time and it's fine.
What happens if somebody is in a costume and they need to go to the toilet? Is there a protocol of getting them out of certain bits if they need, like the gorilla, for instance? Is that it?
The gorilla is an absolute no.
That's a no.
Absolute no. You've had it before where you're waiting to do a quick change and the performer's come off and gone, I've got to go to the toilet, and they've just run, and you're like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get them done in time? Somehow it always happens. Stage management, they're holding doors open, someone extra's come over to give you a hand. It's amazing. But depending on the costume, there were very few costumes that you couldn't go to the toilet in quickly. But again, if you knew that your costume was like an all-in-one thing, most people would preempt that and go to the toilet beforehand, and then they kind of at least can cover that period until they take that costume off.
Logistics.
I mean, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's some use in knowing that early on.
Yeah. I did a panto once, and they put this trick dress in for Cinderella. So from her rag dress into her ball gown, this dress. So it took me half an hour to preset it. It was all wires, all hooked up, like it was a whole thing. And then it took 15 minutes to get the poor performer into it. And it was an epic thing. And basically it was clever. There was a rose, and she'd pull the rose out and spin, and the whole thing just unravelled into this massive ball gown. I mean, it looked amazing, and you can hear the kids in the audience loving it. So you go, it's worth it. But she did that to me once, when you're like, oh, and she went, I've got to go to the toilet. I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to get this done in time. But that was quite a hairy one. The first few shows of trying to get that done, because you pressed the wrong thing, it all sprung open before you got on stage. And then I'd be watching her on stage, sitting down, standing up, and I'm like, oh, is it going? I don't know. But it was all right. We got it down to a fine art by the end.
I'm so fascinated by some of these more intricate and complex ones. Like, for instance, in Frozen with the dress change. I don't know how that. I mean, you could take good guesses, like it's probably hooked up to something and it's got various different bits that pop open and it gets yanked off and whatever. But incredible to think about the logistics of having to design something like that, build something like that, and then have it actually work.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the magic of theatre, though.
Yeah.
And I find more often than not, like, illusions are created with, set and lighting and stuff. It's not very often that it's costume. So actually, when it is costume, it's quite nice that you're a little part of the magic bit of people going, oh my goodness, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't know, but when Beauty and the Beast was in town, the Beast transformation, that was a big secret. I think they had to sign like NDAs or something. I'm not sure, but I think it's a big secret. But I love that. So where there's a little trick that's involved in costume, I always think that's quite exciting.
It's such a huge part of the storytelling.
Yes.
You're so integral to the...
It's quite a visual thing, that everyone sees.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it. There's jewellery, underwear, hats, stockings, shoes. So many pieces.
It's amazing. So we have a tradition on the podcast where in this book, the last guest has written a question.
Oh, okay.
We have not seen
until
this moment. So good luck to us all at this point.
Oh, no.
No, it's lovely.
Oh, okay.
What are you doing to ensure the next years of your life are the best years of your life?
Oh, wow. That's a nice one.
So nice.
Totally makes sense when
it
you
does
know
very
you
much
wrote
make sense.
I think I spent a long time being quite ambitious. I really wanted to kind of get to the head of wardrobe position, and I was keen to move around and do it all, and I was keen to kind of keep progressing. And obviously I got there a few years ago, and I feel quite set and quite happy with the role now. And actually, I think that's the thing, to go actually just take the time to enjoy it now and enjoy the shows and enjoy the people I'm with and making those memories and things. You don't have to keep pushing. You can just stop and go, enjoy where you are, because sometimes there are shows that are just absolute treats to work on. And I think sometimes we don't take it in and enjoy it enough because you're always thinking about the next one, or this show's opening. Should I be moving on? Should I be doing this? And actually, sometimes it's good to just go, I'm happy where I am. I'm in a good place. I'm on a good show with good people. And let's just enjoy that for what it is, because, it's not always the case. And yeah.
No, it's lovely. It's lovely. It's just enjoying the view where you've got to, isn't it?
Yeah,
for a little
absolutely.
bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Acknowledge there might be other peaks you want to climb later, but
but actually, just take it in sometimes and go, it's all right. It's all right. I'm happy to just sit still for a little bit.
Brilliant. Well, we wish you absolutely the best
Thank
years
you
of
very
your
much.
life coming
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's
Thank
been
you.
so fun. So insightful. Wow.
Yeah, brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the 5-Minute Call. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and ring the bell for notifications. Your support really helps us bring you more amazing stories.
If you are or have been affected by any of the topics discussed in today's episode, please see the show notes below for some helpful resources.